Hello Beer Geeks. Now, I have recently moved house, and like I do whenever I go anywhere in the world, the first thing I did was Google local pubs and local breweries, and I was really excited to find that I had a local brewery, but it wasn't quite what I expected. What I am now living right by is this place. Crossover Blendery, just outside of Hitchin and Letchworth in Hertfordshire. These guys make incredible spontaneous beer in one of the most beautiful settings of any brewery I've ever been to. And this video we're going to be talking about the adventure that is making spontaneous beer, particularly when opening in the middle of a pandemic, and also the vital, important difference between spontaneous and mixed fermentation beers and what British fruit can add into the mix. So Charlie and George, thanks for joining me. It's a pleasure to be back here. I don't know whether I'll tell you the story of this shoot, but it's been an adventure. Tell me all about Crossover Blendery and where this has come from, because it feels like you're almost the first people kind of doing this thing.
Yes, I mean in the UK we are the only people focusing on 100% spontaneous fermentation. There's quite a few other producers who are doing a bit of spontaneous, bit of mixed ferm, bit of clean beers, but yeah, we're the only people just doing spontaneous fermentation, which, you know, potentially could be a bit of a silly thing, just about how long this style of beer takes to make. But luckily when we were setting this up, we kind of had it built into the business plan that it was going to take at least 16 months before we had any revenue. We thought we could turn a beer around a little bit quicker. It just doesn't work with this style of beer. So a little bit about how we started. Thank you. Yeah, a friend of ours' dad, when we were much younger, probably about 15, 16, always used to have Cantillon Gueuze at his house.
Oh God.
And yeah, we drank that.
Just spilling the beer. It's not like you've...
Hasn't taken us years to make.
Yeah, so we were drinking Cantillon Gueuze from like 15 or 16 years old, and off the back of that, you know, we kind of became a little bit obsessed with this style of beer, and then tried loads of different, you know, styles from Belgium, new stuff coming out of the US and also the UK.
Was 15, 16-year-old you not like, that's disgusting, it smells of, you know, manure, cider?
You quite liked it.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely loved it. I'm a massive fan of like anything acidic. And then it also had this sort of extra complexity, which was sort of undescribable. And yeah, even when we were, you know, at university, we always try to buy things like Cantillon and Dre Fontaine, and it was really hard to get hold of. And if you could get hold of it, it was really expensive. So yeah, anyway, in 2018, there's a group of us went to Belgium. We went to Cantillon for the tour, did the tour, which was incredible, and then ended up at their tap room, had a lot of their beers, drinking a lot of their specials. A lot of them had been fruited or been added with wine grapes. And then yeah, off the back of that, we're just like, let's do this in the UK, you know, put a British twist on it. And yeah, it took about a year and a half of planning. Got our first beer into barrels in January 2020, and then sold our first beer in March 2021.
March, I remember.
So you mentioned that you're aging these things for a long time. So your end goal is to end up with, you know, the Belgian Lambic style of multiple blends of aged beers with young beers. But at the moment, you don't have that. The oldest beer you have is, I guess, pushing 18 months.
18 months, yeah.
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 But you managed to release 4 beers. So what can you tell me about the process of releasing sort of the younger style spontaneous beers?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the beer definitely takes a while to not only, I mean, it's actually pretty unpalatable for quite a while. You do have some stuff which is fine within the first 6 months. You do have some stuff which is pretty hideous within the first 6 months. So, you know, we were targeting trying to get a beer out maybe within like the first 8 months, which was just never going to happen because it takes a long time for this stuff to sort of round off a lot of those nasty flavors. You do get a lot of off flavors as well because, you know, we can't really, when we started this up, we couldn't control the temperature in here at all. Now we've got some units where we can heat and cool the room. But when we were doing it, we were basically completely open to the elements in terms of, it was winter time when we moved in here, and it was really, really cold, and we had a lot of wind coming through, and it was very difficult to get the barrels going. But yeah, the yeasts aren't kept at a constant temperature. They go from cold to warm pretty regularly. So we had some pretty horrible stuff going on with the barrels early on, and we quickly realized that, this stuff does take time, and it takes time to come around to something which is palatable and interesting. But yeah, the beer that we've brought out so far, it's quite young beer. So you're looking at stuff which is more a year old, and that's been going on to fruit, some quite long re-fermentation, some shorter. But yeah, that character that some people might associate with spontaneous beer and lambic beer is not something that we are seeing quite yet. But I think it's important to point out that we're not trying to recreate lambic beer. This is very much our own project in the UK. It's our own spontaneous fermentation. It's our own sort of terroir and terroir, and whatever you want to call it. This is very much our thing. The lambic producers have inspired us, of course, but we are not trying to replicate those flavors and those characters. That's their beer, which we absolutely love and respect, but this is all our beer, and we're going to do something that is very much our own take on it.
Exactly. I mean, we are looking for the same complexity as the Belgians get in their beers. That is definitely an end goal. And we thought the young beer, the beer we've been blending with a lot of fruit, it has paired really nicely because it's got, quite low acidity. And then when we bring in the sort of malic and citric acid, a lot of the fruits, it just works really well with our young wheat beer. But now we're at 18 months, like a lot of the barrels are rounding out. We're getting more pronounced lactic acidity. We're seeing potentially a bit of funk as well, which is cool. But yeah, it's now going to be pretty cool blending with older stock, which will be 18 months rather than 8 to 10 months.
Yeah. It's interesting and important, I think, to point out that we get acidity a lot slower than maybe some of these mixed fermentation beers. So
the difference between mixed fermentation and spontaneous is entirely wildly inoculated. You haven't got anything in it. Mixed ferm, they could be adding the strains that they want to use. Yeah.
So it's still very difficult, but you can maybe steer a beer the way you want it by adding certain yeast and bacteria. But obviously with us, we have such a crazy array of microflora that's alive in our beer and working together. So for us, things take a lot longer, and we weren't really seeing any acidity in the first summer, even though last summer was a lot warmer than this summer. It definitely got a lot warmer in the barn, and that's the time when you'd expect to see the bacteria getting to work. Well, for us, we weren't really getting any perceivable acidity until this summer. So we're moving into our second summer, which is interesting. Again, speaking to people about our younger beer, people are like, well, why isn't this sour? Why isn't this? And, one, it's not a sour beer. And two, it's because it takes a lot longer. This is a totally natural product. You can't just expect it to become acidic from day one. It does take a long time. And because we're looking to age these beers for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year, it's great that we're not getting acidity in the first year, and then you're pushing into your second year.
Third year,
And that's great, and that's another reason why we use larger barrels. So we've got 400 litre barrels behind us. A lot of these places, they'll only have your standard wine, like 225 litre, 227. Like, we use bigger barrels with thicker staves because we're trying to ensure that the beer can get to maybe that 3 year mark, and it isn't just total vinegar, and it's not too acidic, and we can actually use it as blending stock.
We're also pretty regimented. So during the process, just like with whiskey, you lose quite a lot of beer to evaporation. Normally it's between about 10 to 20% a year. So twice a year we will top up the barrels right to the top to stop that oxygen ingress. Again, as George was saying, this is to stop. We do not want heavy acetic character in the beer.
And acetic thrives in oxygenated environments. So if you keep the barrels full, there's nowhere for it to start.
Exactly. But it's also, at the same time, it's an incredibly important component in a final blend, but in small amounts. So, we're really happy we're not seeing sort of super acidic beers.
It's interesting what you said, to the feedback of people going, why isn't it so sour? And you said it's not a sour beer. It feels like particularly with kettle sours and stuff, but also with spontaneous and mixed fermentation, people look at the sourness like we look at bitterness in beer. It's like it's the thing that you're aiming for.
Yeah.
Whereas, for me, I've always thought that acidity was one of the ways of presenting other flavours.
Yeah.
It's like adding salt. It's not the key flavour that you want in these beers, and that's what I'm enjoying about this beer. At which point, it would be good to talk about that British twist you mentioned right at the start, which is heavily fruited with British varieties, right?
Yeah, exactly. So the start, I mean, as I said earlier, yeah, so we want to be fruiting with our younger beer, but this really interestingly, so most of our beers will do 400, well, which we've released so far, we do 400 litres of beer and then normally 120 kilos of fruit, which is roughly about 300 grams per litre, whereas this we did 120 kilos on 400 litres of beer, but then we also added another 400 litres.
Yeah, we blended back. This is our biggest blend so far, so it's 4 different barrels, but we don't take the whole barrel, only take a portion. So we're trying to take small portions.
Because blackcurrants are super, really acidic. So when we were trying it, we're just like, this is, and we kept on, adding another 100 litres. We're like, this is still too acidic, too acidic, too acidic. And then we, think we've hit a pretty sweet spot with this. And it can also take a long time to actually get the blends right. You know, we can sit down for an hour, and then if we don't get the blend right, your palate's completely shot, and then we'll come back to it, a day or 2 days later. And then, one of our beers took us about a month to get right.
Yeah.
Are you then worried that the barrels are changing subtly as you...
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare. Like that's why it takes time. You come back to it and you're like, okay, well, barrel 18 is the one we're going to use because it tasted great for this blend. And you taste, you're like, this genuinely within a month has changed. You're just like, this is really frustrating because we're then going to have to go through the whole process again. It's not frustrating. It's really fun blending, but but you know what I mean. Like,
it's a challenge.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because. We did use more components in it, but the blackcurrant is still really dominant in this beer, which we love because we love blackcurrants. But it's interesting, like trying to work with the fruit and get around like a lot of these strong flavors, particularly blackcurrants, which are just like so punchy.
And yeah, all the different varieties. So this one is a variety called Bengan. We got it from a farm in Sussex called Maynards. So this is Bengan, and the ones we're using this season are called Ben Alder. And again, it's going to be really interesting to see, is there a big difference between the two different varieties?
Yeah. Which is, it's not necessarily an element that people think about with brewing. So we think about fruited beers and we go, this one's with cherries, this one's with blackcurrants. We don't, or at least we haven't previously started going, this is with this kind of cherry. Like maybe a little bit in Belgium.
Yeah.
But the fact that you guys are really dialing into that and using it not just as, a puree that comes in from a company that purees, you're going out and sourcing the specific fruits, which some brewers don't even do for the specific barley varieties. It's just like that's caramel, that's pilsner, and I think you mentioned it's like 250 varieties of plum. In the UK, and all these wild varieties we could have of fruited beers, and we haven't explored that at all yet, really.
But they each, they like plums alone. They're how different their characters are in terms of like their flavour and their colours and their shapes and what that brings to the beer. We can do plum beers which are totally different, but it would just be sold as a plum beer, which just doesn't really seem right because there's so much out there, so many interesting fruits out there, and you do need to discover what's different between them and what they bring to the table, which is different, rather than it just being a plum beer, or just being a blackcurrant beer, or just being whatever, and that's something we really want to explore more and experiment with more.
So you're entering this world of people who are so excited to see you, so excited to try it, and will probably have all these certain perceptions of it, of how it should taste, how it should be made, what it should look like. How have you kind of dealt with that, particularly as two people not from brewing backgrounds and perhaps not having any idea what to expect? What's it been like to have so much expectation kind of thrown at you? Like putting that first beer out must have been...
terrifying.
Yeah,
it's pretty... It was pretty hard because there was a lot of expectation, and it takes such a long time to make it, and then we know the barrels have got a way to go, and we know that we are going to improve as blenders, and we will bring out hopefully better and better beer, like anyone who's making beer, or like anything you're trying to improve. Every year we're trying to improve, but it was really tough because we were completely new to the market, and people already had this really high expectation. People already, as soon as you say spontaneous, they're thinking of Lambic, you know, they're thinking of some of the American producers, and they're like, great, that's what it's going to taste like, you know, and that was really difficult, you know. But I'm really happy with the beer we brought out so far, you know, and you know, the beer is only getting better, which is really exciting from our perspective, particularly with blending, you know. It's only getting better and more exciting every time we blend. And, you know, thankfully, we've actually had quite a patient, loyal customer base who are supporting us, I hope, because not only do they like this sort of beer, but, you know, there are not many of these sort of places around the UK, and we've got a great local audience who are supporting us as well. And, you know, that's kind of all we could ask for at this point.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, obviously being a business of COVID, we've done everything through Instagram, which is not the reason we got into this business. We want to be going to the festivals.
Do you have a digital media background?
Yeah,
That's new as well.
So yeah, it's, you know, it's been incredible. You know, amazing support from people, which has been great. But, you know, we want to go out there and do events. We want to travel around speaking to people about this style of beer. Like now we've done 2, you know, live events, one in a bottle shop in a nearby town, Biggleswade, and then we had a running club come to us on Sunday, and, you know, we had 16 people here, and we took them around the site, explained what we're doing, and then the buy-in is so much more like powerful, I think, than just doing it straight over Instagram.
Yeah.
But, you know, yeah.
It's so important to this style of beer as well. I know you guys are very keen to separate spontaneous and mixed fermentation as 2 very different kind of processes, but also that whole conversation around sour beer as well. You know, probably I'd be tempted every now and then to go, particularly if I was talking to someone who didn't really understand it, I'd start by going, it's a sour beer.
Yeah.
That's probably the last thing I'd be doing. And those conversations, like getting those conversations right.
Yeah.
It's really important. So Instagram's a great tool in that regard, but it's not going to be the same, I guess, as taking them around the barrels. They can smell the hops, taste the barrels, and see what it's like to run this kind of business and understand the scale, not the size of it, but the scale of the timing.
Yeah.
Well, these guys keep on saying that they are still experimenting and things are going to get better, but I can assure you this is absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Even though you've had to blend it back and back and back, it's still so fruit forward. So much of that blackcurrant character and a lovely kind of lactic, zingy acidity as well, just coming through. And you can get the beers, you release monthly for any merch?
Try to. Kind of.
The whim of nature, of course.
Yeah. We've got a release coming out at the end of this month, which is the blackcurrant beer.
Right.
And then we have a raspberry and blackberry beer coming out. And then we have our base wheat beer finished in a rum barrel, hopefully coming out in November, Christmas time. And then that's us done for the year, and then we're on to next season.
Well, on that note, thanks for having me.
Cool.
Yeah,
Sorry
cheers.
this video took its time.
Don't worry. All good.
Cheers.
Cheers.